Good evening. My name is Brett Stalkup. Welcome to Choices Podcast. You can find us at choicespodcastofficial.com or on our Facebook page, Choices Podcast Official. We encourage you to ask questions with comments on the broadcast via Facebook or YouTube. You have choices in your professional, business, and relationship part of your life. We're here to help you in your journey and help you make better choices. And so, with that being said, we have a great guest tonight. He's awesome. We're going to introduce him in a minute. And with that being said, you know my co-host, Carcass John. Carcass, how you doing?
Doing great, Brett. This is one of my favorite times of the week when we get to do this. And we do have a great guest. I'm excited.
Yeah, he's awesome. He's got a great story to tell. Anyways, so have you picked a song for us?
I have. And once again, I'm kind of going out on a limb here. I'm trying something new. I'm exploring all genres of music. This is by a band called Killing Joke. And here it goes. It's Sea of Hurt, I feel the waves of pain. Just that initial line. I've had that feeling so many times before.
Say it again. Say it again. I missed it.
Sea of Hurt, I feel the waves of pain.
Okay.
And now the tide comes in again. I'm caught in a vicious cycle of despair. Give you the courage to face another day. Oh, sing a song of joy. Sweet childhood, never desert me. A time for celebration. Overcome with a sense of elation. I'll never let you get to me. Survival is my victory. Time for celebration. Overcome with a sense of elation.
Whoa. That's over my head, dude.
No, it's not. It's you've probably felt like I think that what we're going to talk about tonight is sometimes we feel just overwhelmed, and when the tide goes out and we're not feeling the waves beating against us, we think we're safe, and then we see the tide coming in again, and we're kind of having to prepare ourselves for the onslaught again. But we sue for strength, and we pray for strength, and we ask others to help us get through it. And that's the way, we make some good choices. We make some bad choices. Sometimes we need to have others guide us through it. But, man, I'm those days of feeling the waves of pain are slim and none. I get frustrated, but I have a different perspective than I did even just a few years ago. So this is a great thing.
Hey, look, let's go ahead and get our guest on because he needs every minute that we can give him. We have our guest was a pitcher with the Washington Nationals, and he's a Major League Baseball player. But you know what? I talked with him yesterday. He ain't about baseball. He has got such a passion for helping people live their life. He's written a book, which you can get on Amazon, about perspective, perception, and perseverance. And I said, John, it's all about the 3P, man. 3P. I have to break it down because I'm a simple dude from South Irving, man. You can't be telling me perspective, perception, perseverance. But anyways, with that being said, I'd like to introduce John Patterson. Awesome dude. How you doing, John?
Hi, guys. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate everything for you allowing me to be here.
Well, we're glad you're here. So tell us about your book and what it was like to write a book.
It was a great experience. I had no idea about writing a book. I had some amazing people that could help me, and my wife helped me, and I think I rewrote it probably a dozen times. I'd write a chapter and I'd start over and I'd write it again until I felt like, okay, this is how I want it. But it was therapeutic for me. I had a lot of things I wanted to say. I had a lot of internal turmoil that I wanted to release and just get rid of, things that I felt like I was holding on to, and secrets that I felt like I was holding on to. And I was like, I have to let this go. So my therapy was, I'm going to put it on paper and I'm going to try to help as many people as I can through my story.
Wow. So I asked you earlier, tell us a little bit about your history, about your story.
Yeah, so I grew up in a baseball family. My dad was a second round pick, played 8 years with the Baltimore Orioles. My mother was his high school girlfriend and lived that life with him. And growing up, I heard stories about my father. I grew up in a small town in East Texas and had an older brother. So I was always a younger brother tagging along. And, I learned a lot at a young age. By the time I was 9 years old, my dad came home from work one day, and I sat on the tailgate of the truck with him in our driveway, and I said, "Daddy, I want to be a Major League Baseball player when I grow up." And he said, "Well, these are the things that you need to do. These are the things you need to focus on." I said, "Perfect, let's do it." Well, each year I got better and better, and I noticed I had a talent. I noticed that I was opening eyes. I was having a lot of success. By the time I was 14 years old, the New York Yankees were sitting in my living room, and the Atlanta Braves, and these guys started following me everywhere I went. And there just became, there was one, and there was two, there was, all these scouts just everywhere I went, everywhere I pitched. And yeah, by the time I was 16, 17 years old, I had 75, 80 scouts at the games I would pitch in high school and in the summer. And I ended up being the fifth overall pick in the first round. I was the first high school player drafted in 1996. Um, you know, I just had accomplished everything that I wanted to accomplish. And with that, my story really kind of started at that point. Um, there was a ton of pressure. There was a ton of money. There was a little bit of turmoil with me and my father. My dad was a very loving but somewhat controlling man, and I didn't know how to deal with that. I didn't mature quick enough to deal with that, and he didn't allow me enough rope to go and be on my own. And so there became some friction there in our relationship, and that caused me to pull away from my family a little bit. And so I just was in this world of stress, and I felt very alone. By the time I was 21, I was the number one right-handed pitcher prospect in baseball, and I was either going to be in the major leagues that year, or I was going to play for Team USA in the Olympics in 2000. And I was on the 1999 Pan Am team. Were the first professional players to be allowed in baseball for the Olympics. So it was an amazing experience. And so I had all these things going for me, but at the same time, I was very unhappy. I was a very sad guy. I was very moody, and I just couldn't really find happiness because of the lack of perspective, the lack of perception. And I had the perseverance, but I didn't understand it all. I was just a young man thrown into a world very early, and I had an elbow injury. I at the worst time of my life, I lost my career, I lost my family, I really lost everything. I fell into depression. I lost my routine, I lost my teammates. I ended up becoming a drug addict, all different types of drugs, started with pain pills and marijuana and that kind of thing, and progressed to cocaine over the years. And it took a long time for me to realize that I loved myself, that I loved baseball, that I loved my family, and that I needed to get my perspective of God, family, get all of those things back
Mhm.
before I could rebuild my life and rebuild my career. And so I made the choice of putting everything bad in my life down, asking for help, being accountable for my actions, and putting my life back together. And everybody was there for me when I started asking for help. And so that's really what the book is about. It's about life. It's about having success, having failure, making good choices, making bad choices, and asking for help. And ultimately, I was able to pitch many years in the big leagues. Had my best year in 2005 with the Washington Nationals, and unfortunately had another elbow injury that ended my career. But yeah, it's just a story. It's a story of a lot of sadness, but it's also a story of overcoming and really
That
finding what's important in life, not the day-to-day successes and failures, but really truly what's important.
we were Carcass and I were talking to you before the show and talked to you about perception. How did you grab that word out of your heart to write about it?
Yeah. So when I first started writing, that word really wasn't something that I was writing a book around. It was it was a word that all of a sudden started showing up in my writing. And it all started to make sense to me of why I was writing what I was writing. And perspective on life is probably what for me for sure, for my family, we talk about it a lot. And you know you can have a horrible day, and there's many people out there that would beg to have that day. There are so many different things in life that can drag you down, that can ruin your day, that can just basically make you completely insane, right? We all know that. We know that. We deal with that every day. But for me, as I was writing, I looked at my life and said, who wouldn't want this life, right? Who wouldn't want to be a first round pick? Who wouldn't want to have a family that loves them? Who wouldn't want to play in the major leagues? Who wouldn't want to have all of these things, but yet you're unhappy because it's not perfect? And so the perfection part is what was basically ruining my life. Was I was after perfection instead of just going out, having fun, enjoying each day, and understanding that it's not going to be perfect. You're going to have bad days, and it's not always going to go the way you want it. So that's perspective.
It sounds like you're talking about like good pitches and bad pitches.
I'm talking about
Everybody's
everything.
with you if you're pitching
Yeah.
good, and then
Yeah.
everybody's against you if you're pitching bad.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're being judged constantly, right? As a pitcher, you're being judged batter to batter sometimes. But I was my own worst critic. I was such a perfectionist, and I had such a high regard for my ability that I wanted to be perfect all the time. Well,
Mm.
that's just setting yourself up for failure, right? You can't be. You can try your best all the time, but you're never going to be perfect. Um, it was just, my biggest thing too was like I would work really really hard. I would prepare. I would train. I would do all the things I was supposed to do, and then I'd have a shoulder injury, or I'd have an elbow injury, or I'd pull a muscle or whatever. And so it was the kind of this up and down all the time emotionally. And then just over the years, it just became this like, what am I doing? It was really hard.
So I hear you talking about perspective, the way you perceive a day, like how you're doing and going through a day.
Yeah.
And then I hear you talking about perception,
Hmm.
about how people perceive you and how you were perceiving yourself.
Hmm.
And then where does perseverance come in?
Perseverance is the fight, the fight to get through the adversity. And for me, that there was constant adversity on the field. There was constant adversity off the field. There's adversity in relationships. And so to be able to gain the perspective, could gain the correct perception of you and of the situation and of how people might perceive you, and does it really matter? But if you don't persevere and don't push through the situations and quit, then you're making a terrible choice, and you're never gonna get anywhere doing that. You're constantly gonna be unhappy.
Carcass and I Carcass and I are friends outside of the podcast, and we've worked for a few football players in different capacities. And it's just a different breed. I still represent a bunch of them. It's a different breed, but it's different from the football players are different from the baseball players. And I'm hearing a lot of the really cool stuff that y'all do. But how did you lay it all down? You know what I mean? How did you lay the drugs, the alcohol, and the pills down? Let's start there.
Yeah. I think I had to hit rock bottom. I think I had to get to a certain point where I was, I mean, the story that I write about in the book was I had been high for about a week. I would say 5 to 7 days, obviously I can't remember. Where I hadn't been asleep. I had been in 3, 4 different cities. And I finally made it back home to Texas. And I mean, I was just an absolute wreck. I was engaged. She was doing all these things with me. And we got into an argument, as you can imagine. And I was like, that's it, no more. Take the ring off, put it on the counter, out. And she did. Fortunately, she did. And I had hit rock bottom. It was just kind of like, okay, I'm done. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm going to die. I'm not going to make it out of here. I was 24 years old, I want to say. I had been given so many gifts in my life. I just didn't know how to use them. And I knew somebody that did, and that was my dad. And so it was about 2 o'clock in the morning. I picked up the phone. I called my dad. And of course, by the second or third ring, he picks it up. I said, hey, Dad. I was like, I hate to bother you. I was like, but I need you to come get me. And he said, I'll be right there. No questions asked. I'll be right there. I went outside. I opened up my garage door and I walked circles around my driveway, which felt like hours, but it was probably 20 minutes. And my dad pulled up in the driveway and I put my arms around him and gave him the biggest hug. And I said, I want to be your son again. And that was it. That's all it took. He went
Dude, you're making
inside.
me cry. He's making me
Yeah,
cry.
yeah.
Oh, yeah, dude. Because you're in your heart
It's,
when you're telling your story. I love that. But
yeah,
I just love the
yeah.
fact that there you are in your driveway. Your dad shows up. Carcass's dad is like that. He could look to lean on your dad, right, Carcass?
Absolutely. And, your story is really hitting home because not just because of the baseball connection, but because I was tasked with teaching these young men from single digits into their teens that you were going to fail. Baseball is one of the greatest jobs in the world. I said it's the second greatest job in the world. And they'd say, why? And I said, because as a hitter, you can fail 7 out of 10 times and you're still a superstar. And then they'd ask me what the best job in the world was. And I would say weather person, because all you got to do is and look good on camera and make sure your tie is straight. But it was, but what you're saying is true. There were kids that took it really super hard, and especially the ones where there's talent and there's a higher expectation, just because people know that, like you were a first round pick. I mean, not many people have that gift or that opportunity, and there's a lot of pressure on you to not only perform for the team but for the fans too. And I can only imagine the weight and the burden of that on you. So what you're saying is hitting really close to home. But to Brett's point, my father, I could call him like you did. I could call my own father at any time, and there wouldn't be any questions. And he and I go round and round about who our best friends are.
Oh,
And
he comes up there with his 5 fingers. You see that, John? I got 5 people I could go to. That's bull.
Actually,
he ain't got 2.
I have 7.
You have 7.
No, you ain't got 2, Carcass. That's crap.
I got the Lord. I got my dad, and I put Brett on the middle finger. I put my fiance
I
on
need
my
to
ring
stay
finger.
there. I need to stay there, Carcass.
And I have my daughter on there too, because she and I have become close over extremely close over life for various reasons. But yeah, hearing your story is heart wrenching. But it's like I used to tell my kids: at some point, you're going to get out of the slump, and you're going to hit the ball. You're going to hit the strike zone. You're not going to walk people, and we're going to score runs, and we're going to win. And that's what you're doing right now. You've got out of the slump. and you've made some adjustments. And that's the thing about baseball. It's all about a game. It's a game of adjustments. Even if you've been doing the same thing for your whole life, it's interesting, like we talked earlier before we went on live, that just a few millimeters here and there make such a huge difference. There's so many nuances in the game.
Let me ask you
really
this,
is.
John.
Yeah.
So, being a pitcher, dude, you're all in your heart. That's what I wish you lived here, because I'd be your friend. Seriously, because I cry at the drop of a hat. But it sounds like being a pitcher, you have to live in your head. You have to
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And then you had to lay it all
Very
down.
analytical. Yeah, I have a very analytical brain.
Yeah. It comes across that way.
That was something that I didn't understand about myself either. You know, like if I could have understood that about myself earlier in my career, earlier in my life, you know, maybe I could have made some adjustments, right? But I could get so analytical and I could break things down so much that I would go out and pitch a really good game. But because I was analyzing it so hard, I could only see the failures and I couldn't see all this, or I could see them, but I didn't focus on them. It's perspective, perception, right?
Yeah, it is
It's
perception.
just this constant battle, internal battle. My battles were not with batters. My battles were internal and they were with me. Sometimes they were with umpires, but mostly they were with me.
You think
It was
yourself
me
to death.
against me. It was
Yep.
me against me all the time.
And I could just hanging out with you for the first time here, I can tell there was a disconnect between your head and your heart. That ain't good. I've been
Right.
doing recovery for 40 years, and
Yeah.
you got to open up that heart and see where the pain is, you know, and that's not fun. But it sounds like
Right.
it started on the driveway with your
Absolutely.
dad.
Yeah,
So where'd you
absolutely.
go? Dude, come on, man.
Yeah.
The channel changer. Where'd you go from there?
Yeah, so, gosh, let's see, they got me cleaned up, and then from that point on, we just started training, you know? It was like we were back when I was 13, 14, 15 years old, you know, at the beginning of really the true beginning of the journey. We started working, doing all the same drills and throwing and building our relationship back. You know, I could be honest about me and what I had been through and what I was going through because we really hadn't had good conversations in years because I was so ashamed of where I was and I felt like I had let him down and he didn't know how to talk to me without telling me what to do, which I didn't want to hear that, as you can understand. You know, it was just this, we couldn't ever get on the same page until I finally just laid it all down. And the other thing that needed to happen, right, is you need to change people, places, and things.
Yes.
So it's kind of like, well,
I love it.
I'm about to leave Texas and I'm about to go back to Arizona, which is where all this happened. And that's not good, right? Like the best thing that needs to happen for me is I either need to get released or I need to get traded. And I went and I had a decent spring training. I didn't have a great spring training, but it was still so new. It was still so fresh that it was hard for me to find my footing there. It was a lot of the same faces. It was the same places. I needed a fresh start. And the last week of spring training, I got traded, and it was the greatest thing that ever happened to me.
That was Jesus.
And
That
I
was
was
Jesus.
so I 100% agree with you that you know, God stepped in and he knew
Yep.
what I needed. And I got traded to Montreal, which this was the last year there was a team in Montreal, but I didn't care. I didn't care. It didn't matter where I was going. It was that I needed to go. And it was a great blessing because I wasn't even in the same country, right? Not only was I in a different town, I was in a different country. We played a lot of games that year in Puerto Rico. We played Montreal. We played all over the United States. I mean, it was great. And I was really able to get new friends, new places, new things,
Were you
and
12 stepping
just kind of be
at the
happy.
time?
And I was building back happiness. Um, I was not drinking, and I was constantly talking about my problems. but I was not 12 stepping. No.
Oh, wow. That's
I
cool.
never really went through a program like that. My addiction wasn't like I had to have it. My addiction was always just this escape, right? It was just when I felt sorry for myself or I felt bad, I would just escape. I'd just go dig a hole somewhere. And but I could put it down when I wanted to. And I know there was a lot of people that believe that. But I also had this really good network of people around me that I knew I could pick up the phone, and I didn't hide it. That was probably the biggest thing that helped me was I just didn't hide it. I didn't hide my problems. A lot of people already knew, but I talked to the training staff. I talked to teammates. I talked to my parents. I talked to the general manager. Right? Like everybody really kind of knew, and they were there and very supportive of me, um, which helped me stay clean, stay active, and stay positive more than anything.
You're going to hear it right here. I've been consultant for treatment centers, blah, blah, blah. I've represented a lot of people in a lot of despair and bad situations. But I've always said, I don't care what works as long as it works.
Yeah.
You don't have to go 12 stepping. You don't have to go to treatment. You don't have, you go to therapy. Whatever it is that works for you, it works. That's it,
Yeah,
bro.
I don't get preachy on how to recover. I focus
Yeah.
more on the things. I ask a lot of questions that I want people to recognize or think about, and let people make their own mind up, their own choices, right?
Yeah.
Um, you know, some people can't go sit in an AA meeting. I get that. That's hard to do, but you can also find other outlets and help, right?
Every time I go to AA meetings, sometimes I hate to say this live. Oh, but I used to have to go. This old man made me go to the White House in Dallas. Have you ever heard of that place? It was divided 4 tables, 2 on the left and 2 on the right. And the one on the left was non-smoking, and the one on the right was smoking. And I'm
Right.
like, Bobby B, if you don't get me out of here, I'm gonna beat somebody up. This
Yeah.
is not good for me to be in here.
No.
Anyways. So
No, that was never good for me either.
what do you want to tell our wonderful audience about perseverance, about winning life, not about baseball, but winning in life?
Oh, there's so many things, right? Success and failure is something I talk a lot about of how you define success and how you define failure. And I, the best way that I found how to deal with am I having success or am I having failure is am I learning or am I not learning, right? There's 2 kinds of people in the world. There's people that learn from other people's mistakes, and there's people that learn from their own mistakes. And then I guess there's a third person. There's people that don't learn at all. Um, and there's a lot of them too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But I was a person that I wanted people could tell me stuff, and I was like, you know what? I think I could do it though, right? And then I had to go learn whether I could or I couldn't, but I learned from that mistake somehow, some way. So learning about how to define success and failure for yourself, and then also understanding that at some point you're going to have to pay the piper, right? You're going to make a choice, and you're going to either make a choice to do things for God's glory, or you're going to make a choice to not do it for God's glory. And when you make the choice, and when you start making the correct choices, lots of really good things and lots of really good people come into your life, and the things start to get a little brighter. The sun starts to shine a little bit more, and I just think that you start to set an example, and from that example becomes even more joy, and then you get knocked down a little bit, but you go, you know what? I know what success and failure is. I'm living, I'm learning, I'm having success, but I'm going to make some mistakes.
What
And that's how I live my life. And I follow this perspective, perception, perseverance. And yeah, it's you know, what you asked me about one of my quotes, you know, I love the serenity prayer, and so many people that are addicts understand the serenity prayer. But for people that don't, you know, it's God grant me the serenity to understand, to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom
Know the difference.
to understand the difference, right?
God bless.
And it is so true, and it is something that everybody can learn from, and it's so wise. It's just a wise statement, and I love it.
I got a young man watching this tonight, and he lost, and he's got a lot of guilt for something that happened to him in his life, and he's 20, and he can't lay it down. You know what I mean? What would you tell him? Because he's listening and he's watching. What could you tell him about choices and making better choices, or forgiving himself for the guilt and shame that he feels?
Oh,
It's a
yeah,
hard one, man.
it is. It's very difficult, and you know, every situation is different, right? Um, I always felt a little so much guilt. We talked about yesterday, you know, of the guilt I felt for having so much, and for also for the mistakes, so many mistakes that I made. And I finally had to just let it go and realize that I couldn't change the past, right? I can only accept it, and I can only move forward. And the only way I could move forward was to get right with God, get right with my family, and start living my life in a way that was positive. Otherwise, I was going to be constantly stuck in this circle addiction, where you start to feel a little bit better and you go, I got this, I'm going to lick it. And then something bad happens and it pushes you right back in that hole where you were. You can't change the past. You can only look forward. And sometimes you have to hit rock bottom before you can see that. And everybody's different, man. It's just, it takes time, and it takes putting the right people, which it sounds like he is putting the right people around him. But until you can get to that point, you just have to pray and have hope that that day will come. I mean, uh, my pastor that I work with now, he's like, the best thing you can do for someone that's going through some things like that is to let them hit rock bottom. The more you try to help them, sometimes the worse it gets. And I hate that, but there's so much truth in it too.
Yeah, I agree. That's awesome. Your heart, you found your heart.
Yes.
God cleaned you up, ran you through the car wash. You got out on the other side. He said, John, I'm going to use you to make an impact on a whole lot of people out here.
That's what I try to do, and it is for God, you know, it's
It
for
is.
God's glory, not mine.
I agree. It's awesome. Carcass,
I'm
dude,
I'm
he's
just
awesome.
I'm just thinking and basking in this because this is really, like I said, this is hit really close to home. And to your point, I had a martial arts instructor tell me once that the best way to learn is to teach. And I thought,
Yes.
well, that's weird. If I don't know anything, how am I supposed to teach? But to your point of being a good example and excelling at something to put yourself in a better place to be a good example, I think that's what you've done, and it's pretty awesome. And like
How
you
did,
said,
Yeah.
John, how did you start making the positive steps forward? How did you go, okay, I need to do something positive to keep my, I call it my journey on life, to keep my choices positive? How would
Yeah.
you hold yourself accountable?
Um, my wife was a big part of that, my family, which I've spoken about. Um, I think my career was something that it was just the beginning of my story. It wasn't my whole story. But when my career ended, I didn't have anything else I wanted to do. I didn't I never had a plan B, right? And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But when I realized like, well, what do I want to do? I'm 30 years old and I'm retired. I don't have to do anything, but my goodness, you got to do something with your life. Well, that's when the book started becoming an idea. And I needed something that I could do in a positive way to help myself and to help others. And also, it would hold me accountable, right? Because now I've written it down. And so I'm going to live this. I'm going to live this the way that I wrote it and the way that I try to help people. And to be that example of, if I go to the golf course and a bunch of guys are sitting there drinking and they're asking me why I don't drink, I can tell my story, you know. They can go and they can pick up my book and they can read the story. And I've had so many guys that are able to come back to me and go, "Man, I didn't know that about you. That's a great story. And
It's
this
your
is what
calling
happened to
card.
me. This
It's
is
your
what
calling
happened to
card.
me. Let
Yeah.
me tell you what happened to when I was a young kid and this and that." And it just kind of opens doors. And then that again, it holds me accountable and it keeps me on the path that I want to be on, where I can be the example, one, that my wife will be proud of me, and two, that I can set the example for my son and open up his heart and let him lead with his heart because I've set the example for him.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome testimony. I was saved by a preacher named Tommy Nelson. Have you ever heard of him in Denton Bible?
I
He's
have not.
he was quarterback in North Texas. I drove. I was lost, and a lady friend of mine said, "You need to go. Tommy Nelson has an appointment with you." But he told me before he witnessed me. He said, "You're going to have an opportunity to make a difference in a lot of people's lives. I don't want you in a strip joint. I don't want you in a bar because bad things happen in there." And I was so scared of him as the type of preacher he was, and the type of
Yeah.
man he was, because it was weird. I sat down with him and he goes, "Stalk up." My brother was a great football coach at South Lake. "Yeah, stalk up." He goes, "Your dad was the president of Booster Club at Irving High School." He reached back, pulled a hat from the Irving High Tigers, when my dad was the president of Booster. That like scared me to death because I was lost. But he told me that stay out of bars, stay out of drip joints, and I was scared to death after that. I never go in them. And it's funny because
Yeah.
people, even your friends, still after 35 years of being sober, "Hey, you can have a beer now. You've been sober 35 years." My wife said, "No, he can't."
Yeah.
I got good people around me too. Good old Greek gal.
Yeah.
Anyways,
Yeah.
dude,
It's
your
important.
story's awesome. So
Thank
where
you.
can our listeners buy your book? Off Amazon?
You can go to my website. My website's called perspectiveagent.com, and then you can buy it off of Amazon as well. Um, if you buy it through my website, I will personalize it. I will sign it for you and send it off to you. So,
That's
yeah,
awesome.
I also, you can send me emails through the website as well.
That's cool. Everyone's going to do it. So what do you want to say about how your book and how perspective, perception, and perseverance comes into play with choices that people make every day in their life?
Yeah, everything's a choice. Choices and control. You can control three things. In my way of thinking, you can control three things. You control your actions, your reactions, and your emotions. If you can learn how to do that, and you can learn how to make choices that set an example for you and the people around you, you start to become infectious, and it draws the correct people around you. The people that linger, you can tell your testimony to, and then start to spread joy from that. And that's really what I want to do with this book, is for people to realize that everybody struggles, everybody needs a little bit of perspective, perception, and perseverance in their life.
That's awesome. I've enjoyed you. I was so excited when we talked yesterday. Uh, I was telling Carcass, I said, John has got a story. It's incredible. And you know what? I'm 66. I'm going to go out swinging. Uh, but dude, you're so much more than baseball. I want you to hear it from Carcass and me. You are so much more. I don't give a damn about a fastball. I give a damn about you and your heart and your journey of life and how you're going to be impacting people. How about you, Carcass?
Well, I like the fact that the premise, the foundation of our discussion started with baseball, because I think baseball, you see these people that say baseball is life on their shirts or whatever. And I think that there are some of those things that you can, just the discipline and the repetition and the practice and the dedication and so forth. But I always would tell my kids that you can take those principles and apply them to your daily life outside of the sport. And I think that some of those things that you did, and with you and your dad getting back to your roots, I think that's just an imperative. And it's been a real joy to just listen, just to sit back and listen. I honestly, I didn't think I was going to say a whole lot, so I won't. But you've been a real joy to have on, and I appreciate your time.
Yes.
Thank you so much. I've
So
enjoyed it.
I asked him for his favorite quote. We always like to end our show with a favorite quote. And yesterday, dude, you know how many times I've said that quote? I had my wife laughing so hard because it's true. Just in order to get going in life, I try to get my law firm is about getting people to first base. That's it. That's all I want. I got to get them to first. If I get them to first, somehow they'll get to second. But I was saying the quote's about when you're in an attic and you're in that boom, 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 boom. That's your inner child all inside. You're going boom, 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 right? And you got to find the mature side of your brain, however that's going to kick in for you, and handle your dopamine levels and all that kind of stuff. But anyways, this quote says that. This quote is all about staying mature, and it's going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay. I said, what's your favorite quote? He goes, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, sometimes it rains. That is the most awesome quote ever. I love it.
Yeah, it's
John,
also one of the greatest movies ever made.
Bull Durham,
But so true. God. Yeah, it's true. You can live by it.
So hang in there. We're going to finish the show and we're going to exit out of here. We're going to talk to you some more. Okay. Thank you, people. Thank you for listening. Please go to choicespodcastofficial.com and like our video. Please go to Facebook and like us there. And also on Instagram. Like us on Instagram, and we appreciate you. And y'all have a great night and live your life and go down the journey of life with positive hope. Thank you.